this second session, I'd like to show how you can do custom mapping, which is more difficult, I think. There are two. So, what happens if you have unmapped code in your own system? So, unmapped code means no existing source code mapping, no source code. Usually, you can have only text rather than source code, like as you see in the mimic data. Or you can have the coding system which doesn't exist in OHDSI. You can choose two different ways. You can make an vocabulary team, or you can ask OHDSI vocabulary team, which is a group of medical and technical experts. And you can send the source code to the vocabulary team, or you can make your own vocabulary team for this. And the OHDSI vocabulary team can make a mapping, review with their internal stakeholders. Or you can use Usagi for your custom mapping. Usagi is free OHDSI tool, and it works based on the text similarity, and currently it supports English. It's a Japanese terms too, and I do think it means a rabbit in the moon. I think the famous Asian myth, and it can do the endless manually map your source code, and you can review the mapped code with your internal stakeholders. So Usagi, again, is a free OHDSI software tool, and it is a mapping code from the source system into standard concepts. The algorithm of Usagi is based on similarity searching, and it currently supports English, only English. So there are many difficulties of custom mappings. You need to require medical expertise. Your source description usually non-English, and it is so time-consuming. And so because of this, it is too time-consuming. We have to set some priority. So usually we set the priority by using the frequency of the concepts or frequency of the codes in your system. So usually we set the 95% rule. That means that our mapping system can cover 95% of the concept in our local institutional database. And you need to update this mapping system regularly. So you need to revisit custom mapping, and new codes are added all times. So it's very hard, difficult operation. To use Usagi, you can download Usagi from the GitHub, as you saw in the previous session, and you need to get a copy of a vocabulary, the newest vocabulary from Athena, and you need to have a Usagi, and you need to build an index for Usagi, as I show you. And you need to load your source code and let Usagi process them. And I will show you how you can use Usagi within your VirtualBox. So again, you can download the Usagi from OHDSI GitHub. You need Java for executing this program. You can download the Usagi like here, and you can download the latest version of the vocabulary from Athena. So you need to log in. And then click the download button, and you can download the vocabulary you need. You cannot download all the vocabulary because it's really huge. So I recommend you to select several vocabulary you need from the whole vocabulary system of OHDSI. And some vocabulary is locked by their own licenses, like this DA France is locked by the license. So if you want to download this vocabulary, you need to show your license for this. So in your virtual desktop, you have the Usagi button here, the shortcut of Usagi. You can double click this icon to activate Usagi. So here it is. You activated Usagi, and we will load the source code into Usagi. So there is a import code button here, and we have to find our source drug list. It was in the documents. There's document. Yeah, documents. And August ETL training. Osagi. Please do not load the drug list. Please load the drug list sample because it takes too much time to load all the drug list to the system. I hope you to follow this. And you need to set the source code column. The NDC code in this data set is source code. And source name is drug full. The frequency code column is freq. You can add your additional info column for additional information. Like if I'm doing this, I need to add some Korean name column. So I will set the Korean name column in the to the additional info column. Or if your local drug list is linked to the ATC code, then I will add ATC code to this. Then you can link this. You can specify your mapped code by using ATC code. And then I will click import. It takes time to import the code, so just wait. You need to wait a little bit. Meanwhile, if you have any questions, please let me know. So,
sorry.
Yeah.
Would you mind going back to the previous step, which is like I click on the app, then I open up, then I'm lost already.
Okay. So you need to click this and Usagi shortcut here in the desktop, and then you can find the load the source in the file tab, and then you can find the source code from the in your documents folder, in your August ETL training folder, Usagi here. You need to load drug list sample.csv file.
Okay, so after I click on it, right, I have to click on file import codes, is it?
I'm sorry, could you say it again?
Oh yeah, sure. So I click on the app, then after that I click on file, then import codes.
Right.
Okay,
Right.
I'm at it now. Then
You need to find you need to find the documents folder in the file explorer.
Okay.
And then August ETL training, Usagi, drug list sample.csv.
Okay, Ken, thank you.
Welcome. Yep. I found raise the hand.
Yes, hello. I want to know, for example, if you are in the USA, also you are using the Usagi or no, because you want to map some code from another country, you use Usagi.
Yeah, and so because I'm in Korea, I used Usagi to map our Korean vocabulary to standard vocabulary. Let me say screen. We actually uploaded our code system into MobCDM. There is EDI code. I cannot find. Yep.
Oh, you look at vocabulary, Chan, you're in the wrong one.
Yeah, okay.
Can I ask you? Can I ask something like this? If in your database the drug is RX norm or is ATC, it means you will not use Ozaki.
Yeah, I will not use. If our vocabulary system is based on RX norm, then you can find the standard vocabulary for mapped standard vocabulary for that by using SQL. Then I will not use Usagi.
Okay.
Yeah, like this. This is a drug concept for Rivaroxaban in Korean system, and you can find the Korean name for this code. And like this, if I want to map this code into standard vocabulary, and OHDSI does not provide the vocabulary system for this Korean drug vocabulary, so then I need to use Usagi.
It's not just about the standards. So sorry, Chan, I'm going to steal your. Oh my God, what screen am I sharing? I'm sharing the screen. It's about, like, for example, it's what already exists that can be that's already mapped and what doesn't, right? So here I filtered originally on drugs. So because you were just talking about drugs, right? ATC as well as RX norm. If I filter on drugs and I click on this list, these are all the vocabularies or medical coding classifications, right, that OHDSI has already looked at and potentially has already mapped, right? So you got ATC, we've done a lot of mapping to that. We got BMDP, you got cell, you got CPT4. This is like Chan says Korea, this is Canada, ephemera ATC. So we got HCPCS, these are HCPCS codes. This is Japan, this is also Korea as well. This is US, this is China. So many different countries already that we've already mapped them, right? So this is the UK, and most of them will already have been mapped to RX norm if they exist in here. But like what Chan showed for the EDIs, they may or may not be mapped. If they're mapped, you don't have to do anything. All you have to do is go to this little download button here, and you can download all those vocabularies already. Now, some of them do require licenses, because that's probably what you're getting at. Like, how the heck did I get this stuff, right, to begin with? I don't want to use Athena to have to do all this, right? So some of them requires a license, like GPI. That's the Medispan in the United States that requires you having a license. So, you have to click on this, and then you have to prove to us you have a license before we'll let you download that. But all the ones that are free, you can just click on the ones you want and then hit the little download vocabulary button here. And then it'll download a jar file for you, and it'll give you instructions on how to install it into your database. So then your database will have the concept table, the concept ancestor table, the vocabulary table, all the vocabulary schema that goes with it. That's what you will get if you hit the download button. Athena is free. In order to download, you have to create an account, and that's why you saw Chan had an account. I have an account. You just have to create an account with your organization name, especially if you have the license with your organization, right? And then you just load it in. What we give you in this little box is that everything's already been loaded in. We already loaded everything into this table. That's why we did a lot of that work already beforehand. Does that help?
Then you speak. I would like to ask you something like this. Did you have any experience like this in your data set? Some part of that they didn't use drug for some patient, and if you don't load the vocabulary for drug, it means it will have a problem in the future for using OHDSI or no?
Yes. So you will have a problem because all of us, when you do research with us, it becomes a problem when you're, the reason why we all put our databases into OMOP is because we want to be able to do research with each other, right? And the whole concept of having something standardized and harmonized is that everybody is using the same thing, right? So when you don't have all the standard vocabularies loaded, then when we run a query, like when I send this query to you, and if you can't find it, then you can't run our research, right? Or if I send this query to you, you can't run our research. So it is very important to make sure you load all of the vocabulary tables in there. It's also very important to get it updated as well, because they do change. Like COVID-19, we kept adding new ones, right? So, and the mappings change. So then we have to refresh our data or update our data with that information. So one thing when we do research that's very important that we always ask people, what vocabulary version are you on and what CDM version are you on? Because then that'll help us better understand if we have to troubleshoot something.
The thing is, in your data set, for example, someone give it to you, some part of that, in that data set, there is no drug inside of that. Okay,
I see.
In a raw data set, okay, in a raw data set there is no drug because they didn't use drug for example, for some part of patient. They followed up them for some reason, but didn't give them the drug. Okay, and you want to map this raw data set to OHDSI OMOP. For that data set, also you use drug for vocabulary, download or no?
We download everything, but you don't use it because your data doesn't have it, right?
Understood.
So your data doesn't have it. We don't typically choose and pick which one to download. I just download it all just in case, right? Because in the future, if you have it, then you have to go download it again anyways. And I've had that. So like with our Canadian data, it only goes to the very highest level, and that's the restriction on the data. It only tells me that they're a diabetic. It doesn't tell me whether or not they're diabetic type 1 or type 2. It just says I'm a diabetic. But that's the restriction on the data, and when I do research, that's something I just tell the people I'm doing research with. If you want to do research with me with my Canadian data, you can't go down to a level lower than the highest level on the disease chain. And then with your data set, you would just say, hey, I don't have any drugs. So for me to do research with you, you can only do it on diagnosis and procedures or other stuff, but no drug information. So yeah, you would, and you can still do it that way. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank
Sorry,
you so
Chan.
much.
I will stop presenting and give it back to you.
Thank you, Marie. And again, so meanwhile, I think most of you actually loaded this CSV file into OHDSI, and this is what it looks like. So you can see the source terms and their recommended standard vocabulary here. Currently, it is ordered by I think match score. I don't know. It is not ordered, so I'd like to order this by using frequency, because again, we need to set the priority to map our vocabulary. So the furosemide is most frequently used drug in this system, and the OHDSI recommends furosemide 10 mg per ml oral solution for this source term. Let me see source term. It's a vial, so actually it is an IV injection solution, not the oral solution. So we need to change this. In the downside, there are many other candidates for this term. So again, based on the text similarity, the OHDSI recommends the concepts for your own vocabulary. And I'm sorry that the vocabulary system in this box actually a little bit outdated, a little bit old. So not all current vocabulary is not is loaded in this system. So again, this is an injection, not the oral solution. So I need to select injection from here. So the concept class was quant clinical drug, and it has only 1 children and 32 parents. Do you agree me to choose this term? Or if you have an objection, please let me know. I cannot see any objection. So I'd like to replace concept with this. And then you can see that the concept is changed. Actually, I do not believe that this is a right concept because it is not the furosemide 10 milligram per 10 milliliter, because it says that 4 milligram from this injection, so it is not the right term. So you might not like this for your own vocabulary system. It's on your it depends on your choice, and I do not have a, or you can find the, you can search the concept by using query. Like I'd like to find the furosemide drug, furosemide concept by using query. Then there is an ingredient of furosemide. So there are various granularity of the drug system, strength of the drug system, like including those are clinical drug, usually including the dosage and the tablet, whether it is tablet or IV solution, like according to the concept class. And branded drug composition, it is a branded drug, so it is more granular than clinical drug, because it has the drug name, commercial drug name on it. So if you do not want to map your this code into a little bit wrong concept, then you can choose ingredient level, like different granularity. Actually, I prefer to map ingredient if I cannot find the right term, so I will use this. So I replace the mapped concept into this ingredient of furosemide, and then I will approve it. So there is an approve button on the right corner, right down corner, and the color is changed into green.
Sharon, there's a question that says, I think 400 milligram 4 milliliter and 4 milliliter for 10 milligram milliliter means the same thing, isn't it?
Yep, can be same. Yeah. So there is actually in here, even though I'm a board certified internist, I cannot give an answer to you. I just show you how you are struggling with your own vocabulary system while you're mapping your own system vocabulary into standard vocabulary. So it's kind of a preference. So I prefer this, but I do not think that the answer is wrong, or there can be the better or worse answers, but I do not think this is wrong. And I will show you the right answer after this demo session. So please wait a little bit, but thank you for your objection, and thank you for your comments. Yeah, I think you're right. So based on the Yiming's comments, I will change my choice again. Yeah, I think it's right. It's better. And there are 3 same drug name here, so you can make this again and again. And I will approve 3 of them. Next is sodium chloride flush syringe. It's kind of the really trivial code you can just use water to flush something. So that's kind of a very non-meaning. It does not mean anything, but there is a recommended concept, and I like it, so I will approve it. When you when you map your vocabulary into standard vocabulary, I usually care that whether it is standard and how many children they do have. So it has like 300 children, so it's quite broad term, but it is not bad, so I will approve it. Next, insulin dummy package for sliding scale. I cannot understand what it means, and I don't map this into another. So I want to just I chose not to map this. So you can remove concept here. If you click remove a concept, then this concept, this local code map to 0 concept ID. Right. Now this local code is mapped to a concept ID of 0, which means unmapped. Still, you can store the source code into in the drug table as a source code. Next is D5W 250 milliliter bag. So it means actually 5% dextrose water. So yeah, you have to be a medical expert for this, and you need to understand the abbreviation of medical, terms. This is 5% DW, and so by using query, manual query, I will find the concept. I cannot find the 250 milliliter bag, so yep, it's yeah, I cannot find the 250 milliliter bag. I just chose this one. It's better. I think it's better than levofloxacin. And the next is the potassium chloride 10 milli equivalent ER capsule. And I love this recommended concept, so I will approve it. I do not want to. I do not think this is the heparin sodium is based on porcine, so I will change this. Not porcine. Perfect. Actually, when you map the vocabulary into standard concept, I think you need to medical expertise, and you need the person who actually used this data as a researcher. So because I'm an medical doctor, and an active researcher for using AMOP-CDM, so I can. It is quite easier for me to decide which concept will be used in our data set. But so it's it's not easy to vocabulary mapping. So I recommend you to send your own vocabulary into OHDSI vocabulary team, like or MUI, that they are really great for this mapping thing.
So one of the questions that was in the chat is about if you may not have chosen the most accurate mapping. You won't always find the most accurate mapping, right? Because we don't capture, again, we're not here for perfection. I should say, from an OHDSI point of view, we're not looking for perfection. We're always looking for almost like an 80-20 rule. And that's something that I want to make sure everybody understands here. We don't go for really 99.99999% perfection. So some of the stuff that you'll find that we will not always have a direct mapping. And when we don't have a direct mapping, what we try to do is we map it up to the level above. And because then that's what we do. Now for SNOMED, I know there's some SNOMED codes in some countries that the SNOMED hierarchy does not cover. So we actually are having discussions with SNOMED International about how to expand their SNOMED codes. And then like RX norm is our standard as well for drugs. RX norm actually resides in the United States, and RX norm is an actual entity inside the United States. We are working with them, but they are centralized in the US, and that's why you have what we call RX norm extensions. And RX norm extensions, if you look at them, are always outside of the US. They're like brand names, or their formula, or they're like drug strengths or something that the US doesn't have. But again, ultimately an RX norm will map all the way back up to RX norm extension will map back to RX norm, because you'll be able to find the drug, right? The ingredient at least. So then the hierarchy is still built in. So we spend a lot of time doing that and building all that in. So you may not always find the exact match, even in the ones that we've already standardized and already mapped. They may not always be 100% the same match, okay? And that's why in the CDM, we never get rid of your source information. Because again, our objective is to get to 80 to 90%, not 100% of all your codes, and not 100% of every research that is available out there, okay?
Yeah, thank you, Maria Gay.
You're welcome. There's another question. If the unit of medicine is different from your local hospital, will you add it as a non-standard vocabulary? So if it depends on the unit of measure, right? So again, there are RX norm extensions out there already for different unit of measure. So if you see their unit of measure is already available, then we won't add it as a new one. But if it is like country specific and it's used across that whole country, then we'll actually add it as an RX norm extension, which then becomes a standard. And that's what you see down here in a Chan screen. There's a lot of oral solutions in here. That's RX norm extensions. And I know a lot of those are typically inside Europe, because Europe has a lot of oral solutions versus the US has a lot of tablets and injections. So that's what these are. So that's what we happen to do. I mean, the actual ingredient probably exists, right, in RX norm, but the form of it, in this case, an oral solution, does not exist, and that's why we have RX norm extensions.
Yeah, as Maurice said, that if you can choose either, you can upload your own drug as a RX norm extension, or you can choose just ingredient, so less granular term, like this. There is an ingredient of metropolar, so you can, if you cannot find the right units for your own local system in the standard vocabulary, then you can use just an ingredient. Yep. So clinical trial drugs can be non-standard code, but still, as Maurice said, that we will not, abandon the source concept, source code. So you can store your source code system in the OMOP-CDM table, even though your the concept ID for the clinical trial drug will be 0, which is not mapped concept. Still, you can populate that. In the clinical table, in the drug table of OMOP-CDM, you can yeah, you can store both packs or ingredients. So I usually recommend to map your drug code into clinical drug, like.
We try to go to the lowest level that your data can go to, right? So if your data has pack information, you will see pack information in here. If your data only goes to the ingredient level, then you can only map it to the ingredient level, right? If your goes down to the dose level, you will see dose information here, and you can map it to that. So it really depends on what your data has. Like earlier, someone said they don't have drug information. I have in Brazil, our data set over there, very strange, only goes to the ingredient level. So I can only store the ingredient there, right? But our European data assets, they go all the way down to the pack size, and a box of 5 out of whatever. In the US, we go down actually to the pills. I have a quantity of 30 pills. So all that is already taken into account in the vocabulary and in the model. So I mean, I can foresee new packs being added, but I don't foresee the structure of any of that changing because, I mean, we've taken into account Asia Pacific, the European coast, and the America coast when it comes to all the ingredients and stuff. So hopefully that helps.
Yeah. So the beauty of OHDSI and OMOP-CDM is that you can choose either ingredient or pack size, and it can be compatible with other data because there are, the drug vocabulary is very comprehensive hierarchy. So really it's fine. You can map your one code system into ingredient, or some of them can be pack size. Yep. And let me show you some other examples like this. Rather than this. So not this. I'd like to show you another example, like LR 1,000 milliliter pack. What does the LR means? I think LR means lactate linger solution. Yeah, lactate linger solution. But you can see that the concept name of lactate linger solution is this. It's a combination of calcium chloride, potassium chloride, and sodium chloride, and sodium lactate. Because I don't know, the Ringer made this solution in the past, so that's why lactate Ringer solution. And the beauty of this Usagi is that even though the official concept name is not lactate Ringer, it can find the lactate Ringer solution by using synonyms. So synonym of this very long concept is lactate Ringers. So I can map this by using this and approve it. So again, that is very complicated because you have to understand what this abbreviation means and how you can use Usagi or OMOP-CDM system. This is very simple, easy question. The pantoprazole sodium 3 millimeter vial. Okay. So, and there is a actually difference between injection and injectable solution. Mui, do you know the difference between them? Yeah,
Mm-mm.
there is a question about this. So if you have a question, then you can go to forums of odyssey.org. What is that?
I assume the injection is like what we do when it comes to our HCPCS codes and our J codes. So they probably map to that, where it's coming from the procedure table. An injectable solution is actually the drug itself.
Yep. So,
So that would be what my theory here as to what the difference between the two is. Yeah, see, it's an intervention, correct?
Yeah. So if you have a question, then I recommend you to find that the answer in the forums. There is usually answers for your question.
Yeah.
So injection means total dose per intervention, while injectable solution specified concentration.
Correct. One is the actual, like you're actually injecting somebody with it, right? And that's the one that comes from the procedure, and that's the one that says injection only. The other is the actual dosage that's in the concentration that you may not be injecting into somebody, but you can. And there's a question in the forum. So is the matching logic used by Usagi different from the logic available in Athena? Yes, Athena is a browsing tool. It's not a mapping tool. All the stuff that's Athena is just a UI on top of the concept relationship, concept ancestor tables. All the concept tables, basically, all the vocabulary tables. That's what Athena is. It's a UI that's on top of it. So that logic is the mapping logic and all that has already been created. There is no logic that goes that says, hey, Athena is going to say which one does it map to, or what the logic is to map it. It's already mapped, basically. And a lot of the stuff that's in Athena, number one, we steal. We do not ourselves do. Like, for example, all the ICD mappings to SNOMED, those are actually out there in the public. That's already publicly available, and we just utilize those. We just put it into our format. Some of the other mapping that already exist, and I put this in the chat, is from other groups, right? Like when Chan said they, UCKCD and the Korean teams, they actually did their own mapping exercise, and that's what we loaded. They had medical experts actually verify all that, and then gave it to the vocabulary team, and the vocabulary team just added it into their tables. China, same thing. We actually had medical experts that actually went and did all the mapping, did the translation, did Google translation, and all that fun stuff. We had 3 different teams actually verify the ones in China. And that just all gets loaded into the vocabulary and the tables that are there. Okay, so that's what it is. Usagi is not meant for that type of mapping. Those are done by Usagi is for things that you do that are different because it doesn't exist already. So what it requires is you load the vocabulary so that it has the reference, the standard codes in there, all the standard concepts in there for it to use to find a match to. Right. So Usagi is when you, like in your hospital, you guys may probably have, like when your problem code, your diagnosis or your problems, there's going to be a lot of times that I see it in my data all the time. Yeah, I have a code, but half of them don't have codes. Half of them are just text fields. Somebody just decided to put a text field in there. So that's how you would use Usagi, right? If I have code, then I don't have to worry about that. But if I just have a text string, then I would do it. Another place that happens a lot is lab test. A lot of lab tests don't use actual coding systems. So that's when you would stick it in here and do it. The question about how do you load the dictionary into Usagi, so you have to download it, and there's a spot here that you actually have to import the vocabulary and then run the index against it before it shows up. We didn't show you all that because it takes a long time to actually do the indexing and all that. So what we have you do here, it's already pre-installed. So yeah, so when you install Usagi, it will, one of the things you have to do is actually load in the vocabulary that you downloaded from Athena and then run the indexing off of it before you can actually use OHDSI application, Usagi.
So I recommend for another question that because manual mapping is very susceptible to human error. Yeah, it is truly right. And I actually personally recommend to multiple reviewers to perform the mapping, and they have to compare their mapping. And so you can later I will show you how you export your mapping into the file for review for being reviewed by third party. Or
Yeah,
you can,
agreed.
yeah, and we usually use like 2 or more mapping assistants to map independently, and then we aggregate those mappings and then review them. So that's how we do in Korea.
Yeah, like I mentioned earlier, in China, we actually had multiple, when we did the mapping in China, we had actually 3 different parties review it. The first group, then a data scientist team, and then I sent it working with the vocabulary team. Actually, the vocabulary team reviewed it a 3rd time. So we had 3 different groups because you can't guarantee. And even through those 3 cycles, I cannot guarantee, and I hope nobody on this phone will ever say that they can guarantee that all the mappings are right. Right? Because if you look at like the China mapping, we did over 36,000 of those. No way am I guaranteeing that 36,000 by hand is going to be correct. Okay. So therefore, you're going to make mistakes. There's going to be mistakes. The thing in Odyssey is we find the mistakes, we correct them, and we keep moving. So very similar to that agile process, even Odyssey is very agile and iterative, right? So that's what we do. So another question is, if I map the medicine during, or wait, the one before that, let's just say we partially map and start making data available for familiarity to research questions internally. Can we continue the mapping? Yes, you can. So what you can do is you can, the one thing that Chan showed you earlier, he sorted by frequency, right? So when you do ETL, again, don't try to get everything done. Even the custom mapping, don't try to get everything done. Go by frequency. And what you want to do is look at your frequency and to the transactions of your data. So for example, if 80, you basically want to get to, my team, we have a rule, 80%. So if I can map 80% of my transactions, the unique values that makes up 80% of my transactions, I stop there, okay? Or my business team will tell me, like when I did our Canada conversion, they said, I'm going to give you the top 200 lab values because those are the ones I care for at this point in time. So then we map those. Everything else we set to the concept of 0 until the next time comes around. So you can set things to 0, basically meaning you can't find a mapping for it, okay? And when you do that, then the next time you come around, you update a next chunk of it. Then next time around, you update a next chunk of it. So you can always constantly come back. So again, it's a constant improvement, constant cycle. Even with the vocabulary, it's very iterative. Again, our group, my target is 80%. Now, granted, most of ours are in the 90s, but our minimum viable is 80%. So you just have to define what your minimum viable is, okay?
And that's why we have the valid start date and valid end date for mapping relationship in the table. So again, it's everlasting, continuing process. So you can update your mapping system. That you cannot, but I don't think you can do this just one time. Once, it's not easy.
So the next question, sorry, Chen. Yeah,
Yeah.
the next question is, if I want to map the medicine used during pregnancy, is the pregnancy categorized as a condition or an observation? Well, pregnancy is a state of the individual, right? So pregnancy is typically a condition. Of course, the condition has to be defined in the system, even if you give the drugs. Now, what we do not do is we do not imply. Okay, in Odyssey, we do not make implications. So, for example, even though I know this particular drug is only specifically given for pregnancy, but if there is no condition for pregnancy in the record, I'm not going to say add a record for this patient to say she was pregnant. Because the problem is, I don't know when, right? I don't know when they started getting pregnant and when they're, at what state are they? So we don't do that. we just map the drug. So the drug would go to the drug. If you do have a pregnancy diagnosis, then the pregnancy would go to the condition in most cases. But again, you need to look at the mapping where it tells it to go. So if the mapping has a domain to observation, then you go to observation. If the mapping has a domain to drugs, then it goes to drug. And so sometimes it is under both, because sometimes it's an observation that the person might be pregnant, right? It wasn't really diagnosed that the person was pregnant. So if it's an observation to say, hey, by note, the doctor says, oh, by the way, I think she's pregnant. Well, that's maybe, right? That doesn't mean that they're 100% pregnant. Now, if the doctor says, yes, they are pregnant, then that's why it would show up in one or the other. And how do you define each? It's really dependent on the vocabulary. So even in here, when you're picking, you have to pick the right one, right? Because if I look at even if I look at something like metformin, by the definition of the word metformin, you think it's a drug. But again, it could be an answer to a question. Okay, what type of drugs have you been taking in the past? And the answer is metformin. Well, in that case, it's an observation because it's an answer to a question. It's not a drug at that point in time. So you can't just base it on the name. You always have to look at the domain, and that's why the domain down at the bottom is very important. In this case, Chan thinks that this one is a drug, so that's why he's looking for all the drugs. He can filter by another one. He can filter by, condition, and you'll find all the ones that are tied with the similarity to condition. Right now, Grant, I'm hoping we don't have too many, but see, here you go. Right, so it all depends on what you believe this particular code is. Right, so that's how it works. Last question down here. Would you? Sorry, go ahead.
No. Yeah, we adopt RX norm and RX norm extension as an OMOP-CDM standard vocabulary. I believe that AMT vocabulary is integrated in the OMOP-CDM vocabulary system as a non-transit vocabulary. Do you have any comments, Marie?
I'm sorry, what was the question? I'm strolling through all this. Which question are we on?
Rogers.
Rogers, yes. So I said yes. So would you recommend RX norm? Because RX norm and RX norm extension are the standards. So if you're trying to run these analysis packages with other people, you're going to have to use the standard codes, right? You can't use the non-standard stuff. AMT is the Australian version, and I know we mapped all of that already. And you'll find that mapped to the RX norm. So in your database, when you store the concept IDs, they have to be the RX norm or the RX norm extensions. And that's how everybody else will be running it. So like when I run a query to you guys, I'm going to say where concept ID equals ABC, and that ABC will be one of the standard codes. So always map to the standard, yes. Our pharmacy informatics was mentioning they were trying to map to Multlum. To RX norm is Multlum? Yes, it is.
But still,
it is. Go ahead.
Yeah. Please remember that we do have our OMOP-CDM's unique concept IDs for each RX norm concept. So even though it would be much easier if the pharmacy informatics maps the Multlum to RX norm, then we can find the concept ID of OMOP-CDM by using RX norm code in the concept table. But still, you have to use OMOP-CDM concept ID in your drug table.
Yes, so Multlum is inside the vocabulary. I do see it, and it most likely does have a mapping because it is something that you can download for free, so it is available. But yeah, it's inside Athena.
And the key for using Usagi is that how to make the source term. I made a source term by combining the drug name of the original table and the dosage of original table, because I know that Usagi is based on the text, text similarity, and there is a numbers, and numbers, is really helpful. If there is a number like for dosage in your original source term, that will be really helpful for Usagi to find the right term for you. So that's why I combine two different columns to make a source term. And this is the key how to use Usagi and map your own data set, own vocabulary easily by using Usagi. And Usagi is not only for the drug mapping. You can map the vocabulary for condition, observation, procedure, or any other vocabulary by using Usagi. But usually, drug is the most challenging part in many systems. So that's why I show you drug as an example. Source file for Usagi needs to be related only to one domain at a time. No, you can, if you think that Rajapam is for dedicated to condition, then you can find a condition vocabulary for this term like this by using this. I click a lot. So you can filter by condition. So then you can find the any condition term, and it does not mean that you have to one single domain in your source, but still I recommend you to use different source table for different domain. It will be much easier for you. Yeah. And if you done some mapping, then you can export this mapping system, mapping table for review or as a source to vocabulary system. So source vocabulary ID is NDC here. And okay, in the file tab, you can use export source to concept map. And let's see. I will save this in the desktop as a source to concept. Then I can find the source to concept says free I've made. You can see the only approved concepts shown here. So concept code of NDC and source vocabulary ID was NDC, and this is a source code description, and target concept ID is standard vocabulary of Odyssey. This concept that which I decided not to map any standard vocabulary, then the target concept ID is 0, which means it is unmapped. But you can use this in your drug table, or you can export this file for review. So there is an export for review tab button, and again I will. So there is for review CSV file, and again, this shows a match score calculated by the Usagi, and the frequency. You can see the frequency too. I believe that Usagi can export on not approved concepts. I'm not sure. Yeah. So far, do you have any questions or comments so far? So I show you how you can use Usagi and kind of some tips, and I recommend you to use Usagi during the remaining time.
The lab data in our database would be stored as one column of sample type and one is exam item, but without a description of the specific medical check. For example, urine sample type and sodium are these.
Yeah. It depends
you
on.
Also use Usagi.
Yeah, you can use it, but whether I recommend it or not is depends on your own vocabulary, but usually I change the concept names, source terms for Usagi. Like let's say in the in the original table, there is a root for the drugs, like including this is the original prescription table, and there is a root like IV, subcutaneous, or per order. Then I when I use Usagi, I added the kind of the root in the source term. Like if it is intravascular, then it can be injection. I just add injection for IV route, or I can add tablet for peer route. So that's how I changed my source vocabulary for Usagi. So if you can specify the samples for your measurement concepts, then yeah, I recommend you to use Usagi after changing your source terms. But if you cannot, I'm not sure. I won't use Usagi for those original concepts. How do you think, Moy?
Sorry, I have to find the unmute button. I have too many apps open, and I have to find the unmute button. But yeah, I mean, you can use it. I mean, when you are trying to map things like in the lab table, you have multiple. You can use Usagi, or you can also use other things that you can manually do, like especially sodium, red blood count, and then white blood count. You can use Usagi to do all that mapping, but those already exist in Athena technically, so you can look that up and actually just write in your ETL code that it's red blood cell count, white blood cell count. But in the measurement table, there's a bunch of rows that you can populate, because they wouldn't go into the measurement concept. It would go into the value as a concept ID column. That's where it would go for things like red blood count and white blood count. So any other question on Usagi? Now, again, like Chan says, what this will produce once you say approve and next and next, we would then, what we would be able to do is you then, like in the chat, somebody asked me, right? What if I have my own vocabulary? What am I supposed to do? What if I have my own local codes? What am I supposed to do? Number one, if your local code is more of an international or a code that's used across the country, then we would ask that you work with the vocabulary team to update it, right? Because then we add in all the different country-specific codes. Or if it's one that's being used by multiple groups, again, work with the vocabulary team, and if you guys have the mapping, then they'll load it, right? The second way is if you have local codes, to use Usagi to create your own mapping. Once you're done with that, like Chan showed you under the file export, you can actually then create what we saw, the source to concept mapping table. And that's what you would use for all your custom vocabulary. So when you're doing ETL, what you would then be in your ETL code, you would not only be looking at the concept and concept relationship table, but you also will be looking at your source to concept table. Now, tomorrow I'll show you a way to combine all of them so you don't have to look in multiple tables. You only have to look into one. Basically, you create a view that has a SQL code that combines the two tables together, so that when your ETL code, when you're writing ETL code, you're really only going off one table. You create a view, and then our team actually creates another totally new table that has that, because views take too long, and it allows us to process our ETL a lot quicker. But that's what we use Usagi for, is to create that source to concept mapping, basically your own custom mapping table, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for the question to show how to load the dictionary into Usagi. I actually forgot how to do this. Do you know?
What was it? The loading the vocabulary? Yeah. let me
Vocabulary,
see.
yeah.
Oh, let me remember my Usagi days. I did this at one point in time.
Yeah. Rebuild. Rebuild.
It's the rebuild index. It's over. Yeah, go over to the help section. Yeah,
Okay.
right there. So you have to rebuild the index, and you have to pick the folder, and you put the location of the vocabulary. And you basically find your vocabulary where it is, the files where you download. In our case, it actually maps against, there you go, the IDs and all that. And then you just load it. But again, it can take anywhere up to 30 to 40 minutes to build the indexes.
Yeah. So that's.
So yeah,
I
just have
cannot.
to remember. I just have to remember my file menus at the top. But yeah, that's what that is.
Yeah.
That's how you load the vocabulary. So under the help, under the rebuild index, you have to define where your vocabularies are sitting, where your vocabulary files are sitting.
Yeah. Since
go ahead.
Since I started the class 30 minutes earlier, so I'd like to close this end this session earlier, early, like in 3 minutes maybe. So if you have any questions, please let me know.
Okay, there's another one, build index. I think you have to pick. Yep. Okay, we already did that. Any other questions before we go off into the next section? Cool. I believe the next session, we'll turn it over to Jing.